The real reason I chose knot theory. Knot theory, I chose this because knots have kind of fascinated people, mathematicians and non-mathematicians for years and for around the world. And it's a nice topic to talk about. Carved in marble 500, 600 years back in the 1500s. And this is just one example. When I was preparing for my talk, I found numerous examples of temples and architecture around the country which has beautiful examples of knots. This was just a very intricate one, so I thought I'll put it on the slide itself. So let's look at knots from around the world. And this again signifies several things. For example, the interconnectedness. This is from the time of Vikings. You might have read or seen series about Vikings. This is in Sweden. And they used to have what are called rune stones. So rune stones are just like pillars on which there would be inscriptions they would make to mark important cultural events. And again you see over here it's the same trefoil, not that you see over here. It's the same kind of a trefoil. And this is on an old ancient rune stone found in Sweden. I'm just trying to emphasize that knots are important for people around the world, and these are kind of examples I'm giving of that. Closer to home, in our neighborhood, in China, knotting is an important art form. So they consider different knots as having different auspicious meanings to it. So this kind of a knot, particularly in red string, is something that you'll often see outside Chinese monasteries, outside palaces. In fact, people, when they're giving gifts to each other, they make ribbons out of red string and make different kinds of nice, neat knottings. This particular knot is called the panchang. It represents good luck. It's like a good luck charm. I'm just kind of giving you different countries now in our neighborhood where knotting is important. This beautiful sculpture of a window is from the decoration of a tomb of Shah Rukn Alam in Multan. Again, it's a very nice, intricate pattern of carving on the window. This particular knot is a very important knot in Jainism, Buddhism, and even in Hinduism. And it's called Srivatsa in our scriptures. And it's also called the eternal or endless knot. And there are again many significances for this knot from a cultural point of view. In Buddhism, it kind of represents the fact that you're born, you have a life, and then eventually you die, and then you are reborn. So this endless cycle of birth and rebirth is kind of captured, signified by this knot. So also again talking about the interconnectedness of the human world, the spiritual world, and so on. This is from a monastery in Bhutan at Paro. That's called the eternal knot or Srivatsa. And this same knot you see is also found much closer to home right here in Delhi. If you go to the Qutub Complex Mosque, and as part of the calligraphy, there are parts of it which are these knotting, and it's really the same knot that you again see over here around us in Delhi as well. So you see, just kind of, we see knots around the world and people are fascinated by it. And what about knots as far as from a practical application, like knots in sciences? Well, we know that knots are certainly pretty as an aesthetic point of view, but and we also know that knots have many practical applications in terms of simple knotting. Like if you are talking to a sailor, there are many different kinds of knots that you need in order to have a sailing boat, right? And different knots have different purposes. There are knots which you want to make sure it never gets unknotted, however much you pull it. There are other knots which should stay knotted, but if you pull it, it should get unknotted. It's important for it to get unknotted. So there are different knots in sailing, but I'm not going to focus on that. I want to focus on knots in sciences, right? Because we are kind of in a science, in a university, and we care about applications from a science point of view. So this is an example of what is called a quipu. And this is from the Incan civilization.